Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com, and today we're going to be going over a nice little chess tactic called the Windmill. And basically you're going to be using a lot of discovered checks and regular checks to completely dominate your opponent and pretty much gobble up all his pieces on the board that you can. So today we're going to look at what a windmill is, and then we're going to take a look at two examples from Grandmaster games in which the Grandmasters were able to use this tactic and completely destroy their opponent. So first, let's go ahead and take a look at what the windmill is. It's normally used with a bishop and a rook against an exposed king. As you can see here, this king is exposed. There's not a lot of protection around him. So what we can do, we can bring our rook to b7. So many times people, if there's an exposed king, they always are looking for the quick checkmate, some fancy move. A lot of times it's these small moves like the windmill that you can gobble up all your opponent's pieces, make the game a lot easier for you instead of trying to get that quick, immediate checkmate. A lot of times you can gobble up all the pieces and then the checkmate's much more easier. So as you can see from here, the only move the black king can make is a1. And now we can move our rook anywhere on the board. There's not anywhere that we can go besides a7 and b7 where our rook can be taken. So as soon as we move our rook, the king is going to be in check. So we can pretty much move our rook anywhere, and so we're going to take advantage of that, and we're going to start taking all black's pieces away from him, because as soon as we move, first move is going to be rook to b4, capture b4. The king is in check, and he's going to have to move. He can't move to b8 because of our rook, so he's going to have to move to a7. Now we can repeat the process, bring our rook back to b7, and the only reason we're bringing it back here is so that the king moves back to a8, and then when we move our rook again, he's going to be in check. As you can see, we're just going to repeat this process. He's going to have to move to a7. We're going to come back check, just so he comes to a8, and we have another discovered check from our bishop. He continues to have to move. We bring our rook back to b7. When he moves, we can now bring our rook to b1, and now when he moves to a7, we can take his rook. So as you can see, before we were down in material, but after the windmill, we're actually up now a rook and a pawn. And it's all because the king is exposed. We didn't even have to move our bishop, but every time we moved our rook, the king was in check, and he had to move his king or protect his king. There was no other way for him to protect his king in this particular situation than to move it. And we could just continuously, with our rook, come back, check, and then take all his pieces. So this is how the windmill works. Now let's go ahead and take a look at two examples in actual games where GMs were able to use this tactic in their own games. The first example that we're going to take a look at comes from a game played by Repetto versus Lasker. And if you want to take a minute and see if you can solve it on your own, go ahead and pause it. But the first move is bishop to f6. And this is a great move because black's king is under attack from our queen. He's going to have to take our queen here on h5, and once he does, then as you can see, we have our rook and our bishop lined up on this king, and we're going to be able to win a lot of material. So we'll see what that looks like here. After the queen takes on h5, we can bring our rook to g7 check. Again, like before, the king is forced to come to h8. We can now take on f7. He's forced to come back. We can just keep repeating. Check. He moves to h8. Discovered check. We take on b7. His king comes to g8. We come back to g7 after he comes to h8. In the actual game, the rook came down to g5. He didn't want to take this pawn so that the rook would come down and take this pawn on a2. He just decided that the pawn and the bishop that he was taking would be sufficient material. But the king is forced to move again. He's now forced to move to h7 because our rook is blocking the g file. And after he moved to h7, then he was able to capture the queen, get his queen back. We had to give up our queen, but we gained a pawn. We gained two pawns, and we gained a bishop, which for a GM is sufficient material to easily win a game. So this is one example. The next example we're going to take a look at comes from Bobby Fischer, which many of you have probably heard of, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that right now. The great thing about this game is Bobby Fischer was only 13 years when he played it. Bobby Fischer is using the black pieces. And his first move is rook to e8, eyeing down this e file, making sure that the king can't do anything, setting up the windmill. After the king moves to f1, Bobby Fischer nicely placed his bishop on e6. His queen is under attack, but he's actually going to sacrifice that in exchange for this nice little windmill that we'll see here. After bishop takes on b6, then Bobby Fischer brings his bishop to c4, and you can already see the tension. White is not castled, so his rook on h1 is not doing anything, and Bobby Fischer is going to use this king out in the center and use a nice little windmill tactic with his knight and his bishop, along with his rook eyeing down this e file to completely mop up all the pieces that white has. From here, the king can't move to e1, so he moves to g1, and Bobby Fischer brings his knight to e2. After the king comes back to f1, Bobby Fischer takes on d4, and after the king goes back to g1, Bobby Fischer repeats, checking with knight e2 after the king comes to f1. Now Bobby Fischer brings his knight to c3, again discovered attack. The king is forced to move to g1, and now Bobby Fischer captures on b6, captures the bishop, and at the same time attacks this queen on a3. The queen is forced to move. He can't capture on a8 because Bobby Fischer's rook is here on e8. And after the queen comes here, Bobby Fischer moved his rook to a4. Then white captured on b6, trying to get material. But after Bobby Fischer took on d1, Bobby Fischer went on to win a pretty easy game. The queen has his White has his queen and his knight in the action, and black has two rooks, two bishops, and a knight in the action. This rook on h1 is never going to get into the action, and Bobby Fischer went on to win a pretty easy game. But you can see here, even using a knight and a bishop, the windmill can be pretty devastating. Even if you do give up a queen, many times the material that you can get back in a game more than compensates for that sacrifice. So always be looking out for, if you have a bishop, a rook, or a bishop and a knight eyeing down a king, if you can use this tactic, because there's so many times in a game that you can use this to your advantage and take a huge advantage from your opponent and capture a lot of his pieces. So hope you guys have enjoyed this video on the windmill. Hope you guys can see this in your own games and use it well. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and if you haven't checked out the website, www.thechesswebsite.com. Hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you guys next video. Thanks for watching.